that's a good segue. My name is Niklas Elmqvist, and I'm the director of the HumanComputer Interaction Laboratory. And Dr. Cho is one of our valued faculty members. So I'm here to talk about a little bit about myself, but also about the HCIL as a whole. Is there a slide advancer here? Clicker? Just this? All right. So I can't do the TED Talk thing that much. I have to stay close to the podium. So the HumanComputer Interaction Laboratory, which I represent, is a research laboratory or research center, really, that crosses the entire campus. We have faculty members from the entire range of disciplines, from computer science, obviously, and the iSchool. I'm a faculty member in the iSchool, and I have an affiliate appointment in computer science. My PhD is in computer science, so I kind of feel at home here. But we also have a lot of people that come from less strictly technical areas, places such as education, journalism, even the English department and American studies. So it really is an exciting place to be. And the reason this works so well is that human-computer interaction is a place for where we don't just care about the technology side or just care about the human side, but how these two things meet. So in 1983, Ben Schneiderman was a professor emeritus of computer science. He's still around and very much invested in Maryland and comes around on occasions to the lab and this department. Founded this lab, and it's one of the oldest in the world and the oldest in North America. And the goal was to try to transform the way people experience technology in whatever way that takes and form. So if you didn't know this before, you should be aware that on campus we have one of the best places to do HCI. And it's exciting to see how many ways human-computer interaction can touch projects. Even if you personally may not think so, you may have something doesn't seem to be very close. So I'm going to talk a little bit about research in the lab, both for my own work, of course. I have a microphone, so I get to talk about me. But also I want to try to represent some of the work that's going on in the lab beyond myself. So I'm a data visualization person. There's a long and proud history of doing data visualization here on campus, because Ben Schneiderman, I mentioned, is one of the founders of this research field. And you heard from Eunkyung that she's also doing data visualization. So this is a great place to do that type of thing. One of the interesting things I've been doing for a while is finding ways to use cool devices, mobile devices, large displays, tabletop displays, full body interaction to interact with data. So I call this Ubiquitous Analytics because the focus is to take the ideas of ubiquitous computing, where we integrate computing into the fabric of our everyday world, and use that type of hardware for understanding data, making decisions, and so on. And this is exciting because ubiquitous computing has had a very long promise of being this amazing future. In 1990, Mark Weiser from Palo Alto Research Center wrote this very important paper about the fourth generation of computing, the fourth wave of computing. But it turns out that the future is already here, because I'm sure most of you have one of these in your pockets, right? Smartphones, smartwatches, tablets, laptops. And in this project, I spend a lot of time trying to find ways to utilize not just a typical monitor, keyboard, mouse to visualize data, but see how we can utilize all this processing powers and all these pixels that we carry around with us for data analysis. So it tries to leverage this idea of anytime, anywhere analysis and meld it into the world itself. A very recent project that was just funded, actually, from the NSF of mine, it's called Data World, and came about of some ideas I had of how to leverage these new augmented reality devices like HoloLens and Magic Leap for data analysis in the real world. And in this project, we're taking this idea of using your location in the world as an index for information, and how can that enable you to make decisions and sometimes answer questions you didn't know you had. So some of the things that we're going to be doing over the next 3 years is to try to instrument the University of Maryland campus as a test bed. So as you put on these devices, you're going to start seeing hidden data streams around you that you wouldn't see with your naked eyes. And this could be things like being aware of what's going on campus, being safe, being aware of where crime has happened, but also the history of past, for example, buildings, events, civil rights movement, and happenings on campus in the past. And then also just being aware of the sustainability efforts on campus and what's going on in the community. So we were going to use the campus as a test bed, but of course these ideas could generalize to other things. Like I said, we do a lot of data visualization, and one of our faculty members is Catherine Plaisant. She's Ben Schneiderman's close collaborator, and she has recently done some work on visualizing hypergraphs, where we're trying to show, for example, co-authorship network relationships. So typical representations for co-authorships is where you have these big graphs of each person being a node and links between them for co-authorship, and then other links for showing citations. But it turns out, of course, that this is a hypergraph because it has hierarchical information because co-authors, so we have edges that have multiple nodes, in other words, is what we're talking about. And they propose some work here that is actually recently published. Jennifer Priest, turns out to be Ben Schneiderman's wife and former dean of the iSchool, is very concerned with community data science and citizen science, which is this idea of taking science beyond the lab and the universities and deploying it into the grassroots surrounding communities. So they've been concerned with trying to build cyber infrastructures to support this type of thing. One of my other colleagues, Tammy Clegg, who's an iSchool professor and also has an appointment in education, has for a long time been working on a project called Science Everywhere, which is about deploying information technology into classrooms, often into underrepresented communities that historically don't have access to these things. And how do we facilitate low-cost solutions for supporting these communities and understanding science? And they've created this this toolkit called Science Kit to support this. Jessica Vitak is one of our resident experts at social computing and in particular privacy. So she gets she talks a lot about Facebook and all these challenges of privacy in an increasingly networked world. And this is one example of a project that she's on. Another one is a large-scale NSF project from 2 years ago. It's still ongoing. It's one of the biggest efforts the NSF has made on ethics and privacy in computational research. The system is, or this network is called Pervade. It looks at the big collection of social media platforms. You can see them all here. I can't even recognize them. You can probably tag more than I can. But the goal of Pervade is to look at interconnected projects across these to understand privacy and ethics. And, for example, to figure out things like the Facebook scandals from Cambridge Analytica and so on. So I'm running out of time here. I only have about a minute to go. So the Trace Center, so this will be just a quick number of vignettes to wrap this up. The Trace Center is a long-term effort to support accessibility and inclusive design. So we have a big funded research center as part of the HIL, led by Greg van der Heijden. And they've had lots and lots of impact over the years. For example, creating inclusive voting systems and post office systems, passport security systems all over the nation. And their so-called moonshot program is something called the GPII, which is a way to create a common unified experience of user interfaces across whatever device you come to, even if it's a Mac, Android, Windows, or Linux machine. Kids team is almost it's an almost 20-year-old effort involving kids in these design sessions. I apologize for flipping through things here, and there's a bunch of these more information. I want to close on one more thing. If you're interested, please come to our brown bag lunch. We have free pizza. This is typically a good incentive for any grad student. So Thursdays, starting next week at 12:30 in the Hornbeck building, which is up the hill. And the 8Cell Symposium is the other big thing. End of May, we have a one-day full event where we present our work. Thank you.